Okay, looks like we are ready to go. I call this meeting to order. This is the Litchfield Elementary School Governing Board meeting. With the importance of the topic we'll be discussing this evening, I assume we will have many families, staff members, and community members joining us for perhaps the very first time. Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Danielle Clymer, and I'm proud to be the president of the governing board this year. I want to set some expectations for this evening and make a few remarks before we begin this difficult task ahead of us. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to Superintendent Gunning, her district office staff, teachers, classified staff, and the community members that have come together to help plan and lead our district through the difficult task of reopening our schools. This is not an easy job, and those dedicated professionals have been working hard to implement a plan based on the ever-changing information and guidance from our local and state resources. I want to quickly explain the role of the governing board and that of the superintendent. As board members, we are responsible for providing high-level governance to the district. We answer questions like, is this choice fiscally responsible? Is this the decision the best for all students? How will this affect our stakeholders? Will it provide equity across our district? And does our district comply with local, state, and federal standards and guidelines? Our job is not to manage the day-to-day operations of the district. In difficult times like these, lines can be blurred, but as a board member, we recognize the importance of working together as a team with our superintendent and her staff to get us through this. We called this special meeting this evening to discuss potential plans to reopen our schools in August. We want to bring information to you in a timely manner and be as transparent as we possibly can. The truth of the matter is, this is an ever-changing environment, and we don't have it all figured out. No one does. The physical and emotional safety of our students and our staff is paramount, and we know the decisions that will follow this evening will be extremely difficult. We know these choices will affect every single family and staff member in our district, and there is frustration and fear around ever-changing safety guidelines, reopening timelines, and funding for critical staff and programming our district relies on. We are trying to make the best decisions we can with the current information we have from our governor's office, Department of Education, and Maricopa County Health Department. We know everyone will not agree with our decisions, as this is part of our job, but we ask for your support and flexibility as we navigate this. We also commit to keeping the lines of communication open as we have more information. So thank you for letting me start with that. We don't normally start in meetings like that, but I just wanted to make sure that I set the expectations for this evening. So welcome to everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it. We have a shorter meeting agenda this evening, but I know our discussions will be in depth. There'll be lots of questions and comments going on. So please stick with us. It might take us a little while to get through everything. First up on our agenda, if you're following along with us on board docs, is item 2A, the COVID-19 school closure and reopening update. That's going to be discussed by our superintendent, Mrs. Gunning, and probably some members of her staff as well. So Jody, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the governing board. And thank you all for your dedication and all of your hard work and all of the endless hours that you're spending in regards to something that we just didn't expect. And there is definitely always a curveball almost every week. What we wanted to do is to provide some updated information in regards to the reopening plan for Litchfield. So I think we'll kick off our slideshow shortly.
It should be on, Jody.
Carry on.
It's on now.
Oh, I can't see it. I only see the agenda. Does everybody else see it?
Oh, hang on a sec.
Okay. There we go. Okay, go ahead and next slide. kind of refreshing our memory on the journey that we have been on for the last few months and knowing how it's all connected. And we always put in the forefront our strategic plan and of course our mission of connecting, educating, and empowering our LESD family and community. Next slide. In this work, as we began, we knew, and Danielle did a great job of thinking, we knew we needed lots and lots of help, and we needed lots of beautiful brains in the room to help us with all of these decisions. So this is just a show of all the various committees, and we had over 100 people involved in the process of, and still involved in the process, helping us design and work through and think through every single little detail as we go through this process of reopening safely for our staff and students. Next slide. This is kind of a review slide, just kind of going through the different task force that we had and the different stakeholders that were a part and supporting us. And each committee was very diverse in the makeup of the members that participated. Next slide. These are just, I'm going to go through pretty quickly. These are just a few of the task force members in our future planning committee. Next slide. Our stakeholders task force, which also included not only parents, but also community members, as well as staff and board members. Next slide. Then we're going to kind of briefly go through some of our subcommittee work. We had a technology subcommittee. Next slide. Student learning. Next slide. Support for teachers. Next slide. Support for families. Next slide. Support for our leaders. A strategic planning committee that looked at the overarching and kind of pulling all of the information together. Next slide. And of course, the school finance and budget as we encounter new nuances and hurdles as we face this time frame of school closures. Within that, after we did a lot of work with all of those subcommittees, then we needed to have some operational teams come together, the folks that have the boots on the ground, so to speak, that could really put together the details needed for school reopening. Next slide. So you can see we have special education, family communication, guidelines for distance learning, and also thinking about our English language learners. We will have a variety of these teams provide updates to our board on Tuesday's meeting. Next slide. We have staff self-care, transportation, and physical distancing. Next slide. And looking at the diverse structures potentially of all of the different educational opportunities, we needed to really pull together a team of teachers to hone in on the critical standards in both middle school and elementary. Next slide. In every grade level. Next slide. Quickly to just kind of go through our timeline of where we started to begin this planning process for looking at the reopening. We began way back in May 4th. Also held tri-district meetings with our feeder districts and partnering districts to try to share insight, ideas, and provide alignment where possible. Also continue to work with all of our committees during this time and take in support from Arizona Department of Education. Next slide. The continued work then dispersed to all of those subcommittees so that they could then break down the ADE roadmap and begin to outline all of the considerations that we needed to take into place and to begin drafting documentation and helpful insight into what we would be presenting to the board. Next slide. That kind of took us up all the way through June. At the end of June, we submitted a parent survey. And then this week we submitted those same options to teachers to try to see what options were feasible. From our initial surveys, we saw that we had just a wide vast of ideas and supports from families and teachers and comfort levels. So we wanted to see if we honed it in a little bit tighter, what is our community wanting, and then what are our teachers desiring. And then we are here today to look at the potential scenarios. We'll continue to research in the coming weeks the viability of each of the options. We will then also in the future have families respond and do more confirmation of the different learning models. And currently right now, the potential of the first day of school would be April 3rd with distance learning, and then August 17th per the executive orders of the governor, which I'll go over a little more detail of August 17th for in-person. Next slide. This is information we wanted to share with you on the family response from our family surveys. We had overwhelming response, 6,500 responses, which we're very excited to have that. And they did it very quickly. So we were impressed that the families reached out to give their input so timely and so quickly. And as you can see in this slide, we had a little over 42% for in-person, 33% for hybrid, and 24.2% for the Digital Learning Academy. Next slide. So let's kind of dig into and go through our different models. But actually, before I do that, I wanted to give you a little bit of an update because we have been collecting our teacher surveys as well. I will tell you, I cherish and value their input. And I have to say how impressed I am with our teachers that they jumped in so quickly. Literally, I sent an additional email last night to ask them to please put in their input as quickly as possible. And we had over 500 responses from our certified teachers. And if you think about it, we have about 558 classroom teachers. So that's a pretty impressive turnaround time. So thank you to all of our teachers for doing so quickly. So actually, can we go back one slide so we can look at the parent survey, and I can give you also teacher survey input as we're talking, so you can kind of see that visual. With that, we had about 66% of them, of the 500, that were willing to teach in person. So that was pretty impressive. And then 69% of them were willing to do hybrid, and 48% were willing to teach a digital model. The other thing that we asked them to do was to go ahead and select if they were willing to do multiple options. And that was something that I felt was so inspiring, that over 37% of our staff came back and said that they were willing to do 2 of the learning models. And 23% said they'll do whatever we ask them. They'll do all 3. And I just thought that was very telling of our staff and their flexibility and their commitment to our children and our families. And so I was so impressed with that and so grateful. This data is just, Brian is just starting to dig into it. So what we'll be doing beginning next week is to decipher all of the family data by school, by grade level, all of our teacher data by school, by grade level, to be able to see if we can operationally match up all of the different options for our schools and for our grade level families. Okay, next slide. If we look at our different models that we have, that we presented, we have the in-person model, which would be K through 8. I know a question has come in regards to why didn't we include preschool? And I'll let Megan kind of share that information here in just a little bit, because it is a little bit different structure. So she'll share some insight in for you for that. This in-person model would be 5 days a week. Students remain in their cohort. The cohort is the main component that ensures the safety of children. They travel with the same kids or with the same kids every day, the same teacher. And we would have enhanced cleaning protocols. We're doing training with all of our custodial staff, and we'll also have training for all of our staff in regards to cleaning. And we will have cleaning supplies readily available for teachers and our classified staff to help assist us in maintaining a clean environment all day long. Face coverings will be required per the government mandates, city, county, and state. When we say face coverings, that could be a mask or that could be a shield. We will be utilizing more shields in the primary grades so that students can see their teachers' mouths and the teachers can see the students' mouths, but it will be flexible to the families of which one they would pick for their own child. And then we'll have teachers will also be wearing face coverings to K-8. Physical distancing, we will require a minimum of 3 feet. We've already gone into classrooms and actually spaced out all of the desks so that we know that we could guarantee a minimum of 3 feet. And it could be greater than that on the physical distancing based on the class size. Materials will not be shared. We'll have modified breakfast and lunch where it'll be pretty controlled, and they will also stay within their cohorts. And class sizes, we have to be clear on this, is that they may not be reduced, but they will be and will remain with their cohort during that time. One of the questions that definitely has come up is are we going to be able to kind of keep everybody separate? And this is one of the jobs of one of our committees that they're working on, and then we'll be delegating and working with all the principals and their staff to determine schedules so that we can ensure that those cohorts are traveling by themselves, so to speak, and will avoid as possible other cohorts and other groups of children. So definitely will be a scheduling piece, but they're looking at all the way down to like the flow of traffic within a school, the foot traffic. Next slide. Special area teachers and middle school content teachers will rotate to the classroom so that children are not traveling. This will help ensure the cohort stays together and minimize exposure. Social and emotional support will be promoted and provided to students, staff, and families. That's our strong conscious discipline piece, and our conscious discipline committee, our team is working on all of those supports to help in the implementation during these times. And then students may choose to transition to a hybrid or online learning model at intervals if space is available. So we'll have to see as kind of time goes on, if a person decides that they would like to switch, then based on space availability, they would be allowed to do so. We've had some questions in regards to TA and for honors. For honors, right now, what the middle school is working on is cohorting those students together. So that would be their cohort. So they're working through those details. And then as far as for traditional academy, of course, we would love to keep traditional academy intact, but we're trying to work through all the kinks and the bugs. And as we get into even hybrid, we have to look at that staffing and that feasibility. And so we'll just be asking, of course, staff as well as families to be as flexible as possible as we try to meet the needs of all of our kids. Next slide. Next, we're getting into our new LESD Digital Learning Academy. Again, it's K-5, 5 days a week. The staff will be our current Litchfield teachers who have opted, and we'll go through a process for that, of course, here in the new future. And we'll have high quality learning, access to virtual specials, social emotional support. District laptops may be available for students based on the need. And they may choose, of course, to transition to another program if space is available at specified intervals. Just to be clear, there is no TA or honors in this program. And it is its own program, and it's not linked to any specific school. So we want to make sure that families are aware of that as well. Next slide. Our hybrid learning model that we were considering is the K-8 model. It's 5 days a week. It is a blended model that includes both in-person and online. Adherence to all the protocols that we would require in person, as well as they are a part of their own cohort and they would travel through the school with distancing, of course, with any other hybrid cohort, as well as in-person cohort. Social emotional supports will be provided. District laptops may be available for students based on need. And students, again, can transition to any of the other programs at intervals if space is available. And we would provide transportation for students who are in this model accessing their in-person day. We are not sure within the hybrid model exactly what it would look like for TA or honors. So again, as we work through all of the different staffing expectations and staffing options during this time, we would just ask that, of course, our staff and especially our families are flexible as we look at the different options. Also, as we look at and dig down into the data to see like how many families are really interested in hybrid and how many staff can support that. At this time, I cannot guarantee that there could be a hybrid model at every single campus. So again, we'll be asking for flexibility for families who really desire a hybrid model, that they may need to actually switch a campus if that's their true desire to be in the hybrid, if we are not operationally able and fiscally able to provide that model on that specific campus. So we still are in the very beginning stages of analyzing all of that data. Next slide. One of the large questions was, what does a hybrid learning model look like? And we have a sample schedule. Our committee with our working with our students learning, they will be working out what does the actual hybrid model look like in more specifics. But here's an example of what it could look like. The class could be 32 students that would be divided up into groups A and B. Groups A and B would experience 2 days in person, regular hours, schedule to be determined, and 3 days online. We are anticipating that, just so this is perfect time to say this, all of our school schedule hours, or school hours, will remain the same. We have not changed any of our school hours at this time. So for example, if I was a group A, I could be in person on a Monday or a Thursday and then online the other 3 days. If I was group B, I could be in person a Tuesday and a Friday and then online the other 3 days. An A or B group, depending on what those options are, could be like it's Wednesdays that none of the children are there. So that gives ample time for the teacher to plan and to provide those multiple and different modes of learning for their children, as well as provide extra time to clean and sanitize their room. Next slide. Megan, I'll let you chime in for special education. And before you jump into special education, did you want to share, I'm sure you could elaborate a little bit better than I on preschool.
Yes. So preschool, we are working on with our attorney, and Dr. Stair and his preschool team created a bunch of different scenarios and pros and cons. Because preschool is a cash controlled department, and basically without revenue, it's difficult to provide the services as we have before. We have to get guidance from our attorney and really sit and work through how can we fiscally provide the services. However, providing the same services that we provided in the past is our goal, but we just need to get more guidance on that. And we have meetings at the beginning of next week with our attorneys to help guide us on those. And then ADE will be coming out with some recommendations as well. But that's why that's a little bit different right now than when we provide for K through 8th. But we want our families and our teachers and our communities to know that our goal is to provide the services we have in the past. We just don't know, if we don't have the exact answer on that yet, because it is a cash control department and we just have to work out the logistics on that.
Megan, what about special needs preschool?
Special needs preschool, we are obligated to provide that. Thank you, Jody. That's great. We are obligated to provide special needs preschool under IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So we will be providing that service. So special ed services, Melissa McComb and Kay Trammell have been planning and working with attorneys and ADE and just trying to figure out how to provide services that we know we need to for all our children with individualized educational plans. They have an operational team that as well that they will be meeting with to work through all the ideas and really utilize our teachers and assessment staff to really help drive that decision making. But ultimately, there's a few things that we know for sure. That in-person learning model, all special education services will be delivered as usual. In the LESD Digital Learning Academy, if a family chooses this option, the IEP team will review the student's IEP and make sure that we feel confident that we, as a team, and the parents are on the team, and the teacher and the the therapist, make sure that we can assure that we can provide a free and appropriate public education that we are obligated to do in that model. And if the team determines we can, then we move forward with that. But if the team determines that another model would be better, then we will look as a team and determine, how to deliver the services that are needed for that child to access FAPE. If there is a child that, because of his medical condition, has to receive those services at home, then the special education teacher will provide those services along with the other providers or the assessment team, et cetera, whatever services are noted in the child's IEP. And then the hybrid model, services delivered in person or remotely, will be depending on the learning priority. So a child who goes into the hybrid learning model, we will just ensure that the special educator and the assessment staff delivers all of the services as noted in the IEP, whether it's in person or remotely on those days or that week.
Do you have any questions thus far before we get into the safety protocols?
Yes, I think we probably all have all have questions or discussion. I will start by saying, I'm not sure if you're going to address this later in the presentation, so I just wanted to bring it up, as I had kind of mentioned in my beginning remarks, that a lot of the way these were developed is not only what we in Litchfield think is best for our kids and best for our staff and what we think we can do, is also based largely on the requirements and or regulations that have been put forward by both the governor at a state level and the Arizona Department of Education. So I know I personally, I'm sure a lot of other board members and district staff have been getting a lot of questions and comments and concerns. And first and foremost, we hear you, we're getting them. If we haven't responded to every email, it's because there's a lot of them, and we are reading them, we are absorbing, we are listening. So please, continue to provide that feedback to us. But Jody, I just want to be really clear as we go through each one of these models. For example, in the 5-day learning model, it is, a lot of the questions I've been receiving from our community center around why are we not providing smaller class sizes? Why are we not following every single CDC guideline? Why are we even offering 5-day a week when we know some of the guidelines are suggesting that maybe having those kids in school is not a safe option? I want to, let everybody know that we understand all of the considerations that need to be taken in here. And Jody, I just want you to kind of walk us through what are some of our requirements. Legally, what are we required to do from a state perspective? And what are some of the choices that we have based on what we can provide with our staff and sort of educational choices when it comes to the 5-day model?
Absolutely. So a couple of weeks ago, the governor put out an executive order, and within that executive order, he listed out some expectations and guidelines for the districts to follow. One of those guidelines was that we had to remain open the same number of days per week that we did in 1920 prior to the school closures, which meant that we are open 5 days a week. As well as it was mandated that you had to provide a place for students who did not have another place to go during the day. So that's kind of where that 5-day came from, and that expectation for that. When we took that information and then also looked at the CDC recommendations and safety protocol from our Maricopa County Public Health Department, cohorting was really strong on helping to ensure that safety and limiting the exposure of children, because you become like your cohort family, so to speak. So we felt that by having those children cohorted, we had limited their exposure to others. So that's where that 5-day came from. Also within his guidelines, then he also started to map out some funding options for us, as we know that our funding might look a little bit different. So we're still waiting to receive guidelines on specifics of exactly what the funding components look like, but he did provide some options for us to receive either 98% funding based on our 100th day counts of the last year, the 1920 school year, and or to be able to look at our 40th day ADM at the time going into this new year. But in order to apply for any of his grant support, we had to also comply with his expectations in what he rolled out in that executive order. And again, we're still waiting for further guidance on what that exactly looks like. We have details that will be coming from our Arizona Department of Education with specific guidelines on how do we apply, what forms do we use, and what information is needed for all of our different models, because we have to roll out all of those pieces. And then this week, at the very beginning of the week, he did another press conference where he provided an additional executive order, and that's where we came up with and had to follow suit of school closure or in-person closure until August 17th. So that's kind of where we are right now as well in looking at those pieces. And then we're waiting for further guidance within that component of what does it look like of documentation that we have to submit to the Department of Education, as well as what will it look like for a funding structure of how do we document and calculate and apply which model works for those kids. So for example, if we start early and it is a distance learning model, that funding is a different formula. And so we'll have to figure out how do we track that information and how do we track those children before they come back to in person. So that's a great thing to kind of also share, is that a lot of folks probably are not aware. In-person funding for a child, you receive full funding for that child. For a digital learning or a hybrid model, it is a reduced fund. So you only receive 0.95%. So 0.95 of that child, so 95% for each child. So it is a little bit different in funding. The governor does want to try to make us as whole as possible, but he also has expectations and guidelines that we must meet in order to receive those funding opportunities.
Okay, so just to be clear, every campus will offer a 5-day in-person option.
Correct.
I know some of the others, right? Based on need and the number of students that select that option, every single one of our 16 campuses will be offering in person. They will offer general education, they will offer special education, and based on the numbers, some variation of traditional academy and or honors, depending on what the numbers look to be. I mean, obviously our goal is to get back to that normal curriculum, but based on the numbers, we'll identify that as it comes. And in terms of, class sizes and staffing, I think it's also important for parents, especially, I mean, I think teachers and staff understand this because they're in and out of the classroom very often, and they understand sort of how our funding works. But the reason that our class sizes may not be adjusted as significantly as some of the other models is because we don't have the staff or the classroom space to cut our students in half like the hybrid model may offer. So while we would love to be able to put, split every class of 30 in half and have two areas, we don't have the teaching staff, nor do we have the room on our campuses to be able to do that. So because of that, what I'm hearing you say is that this model of cohorting and keeping kids together and trying to, at an elementary level, even their main teacher every day, all of them would be together as consistently as possible, not sharing space with other classes as much as possible. Now at the middle school level, we would have teachers rotating. Is that correct? Teachers rotating in between the cohorts, but the children themselves would be sort of stationary in one classroom throughout the day.
Correct. And that's where also it'll be like a little bit of flexibility and a change for middle school, right? Because you used to be able to pick or select your specials. And within the requirements of what we need to do to ensure student safety and staff safety, we had to switch that a little bit because there just wasn't a way to do that, because then you would be mixing cohorts. So we had to change the design from what our typical structure would be. But our hopes is that whenever things get back to a safe environment and it's safe for all, and that we can return more to our typical, that we'll have the opportunity to offer those options sometime in the future. I'm not sure when, and it may not be until the following year, but great questions.
Okay, one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to the rest of the board members. I know they have questions as well. In terms of the hybrid model, I heard you say we won't know, as we're pulling apart the data we've gotten right now, right? We're seeing the big numbers that, you know, how things are breaking down per scenario, but we won't know, for example, at any given campus or at a grade level, what their options may be. On the timeline, I think it was July 10th or 11th through the 17th would be the time that we'd be sort of collecting data or asking for a commitment from parents so that we can properly staff each one of those options. So if I'm a parent with a student at school A, let's say, and I have chosen one of the options that might not be available, will I know ahead of time, prior to me making a commitment, what my specific options are for my school and grade level based on the data that you are, you know, sort of piecing apart right now?
Well, I don't know if I can answer that specifically.
Okay.
If we're still digging through it, and so I don't really know. So we may be able to, we may know, it may stand out like strongly that, let's just say we only had 5 students interested in a hybrid model in 2nd grade at a particular school. So that wouldn't be feasible operationally at that campus. So we may know at that time that we could tell families that hybrid is not an option at school A, but there are open spaces at school B, C, and D type thing.
Okay.
If we don't know specifically and someone does commit to it, we will have that school or that campus reach out to those families to let them know if it isn't feasible, and then let them know what their options are, because they may want to switch. They may want to stay with their campus and do either the in-person learning, or they may want to choose to do the digital learning academy, or they may decide that, yes, the hybrid model works for me. I'm willing to go to another campus.
Okay.
And we also realize that where people were when we surveyed the first time, and then in a couple times for their commitment, they may be in a different place. So we're flexible there, because we know that first one was their best choice at that time for their family. So we understand that some things may change by their commitment, and we have to be ready and willing to relook at those numbers and make decisions from there.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Okay, we'll just start. You know, I'll open the floor. Melissa, I'll start with you. You're the first person on my Zoom list right here. So I'll start with you. If you have any questions about either of the 3 scenarios or the special education services, you can start your conversation now.
Well, first, I want us to kind of address why we're talking about these 3 options. We have gotten a lot of feedback from people saying that they don't like us having a particular option versus they do like certain options. And so I'm kind of hoping that we can share with our staff and our families about how we got to these 3 options and why we're talking about these 3 options, because I think it's important for people to understand where we got to this point.
So how we got to the setting of the 3 options was mainly from a couple of areas. One was from the feedback in the initial parent surveys, and also staff surveys, not necessarily staff surveys as far as options, but also comfort level of what their comfort level was to return to work. So initially, when we kind of jumped into this, we were thinking we wanted to try to offer as much flexibility to meet the various needs of not only our students, but also our staff members, because we know that some are more comfortable than others, but that we know that each option has its own components and pieces that kind of come with it that they'll have to kind of work through. The Digital Learning Academy came from us really looking at and knowing that we were going to need an option for our families that did not want to come back, as well as we wanted to have an option for if in the potential that we had to close schools again. So that's kind of where we started that process. Now, I want families to know too that Digital Learning Academy was something we've been talking about for many years. We just didn't realize we would jump in as fast as we did, and probably with the high number of students and families that are really interested in it. So that's something that's definitely new for us too. I don't know, I mean, like I said, each model kind of has its positives and, you know, pros and cons, I would say. But trying to just meet the needs of all of our families and to meet the needs of our staff as well. And we needed to really get some concrete data. So that's kind of where we started with those once we knew that there was interest. And then we wanted to see, okay, how much interest? And that's where we started with the parent survey to see, was there really interest in all three models? We weren't sure when we first put it out. We didn't know if maybe it was only going to be 2 models. We know the in-person is not we have to offer in person and we have to have something for 5 days. And we knew that the Digital Learning Academy would be something strongly desired. I guess the one that we weren't sure about was the hybrid model. So that's kind of where we came from and how we are here today.
Well, right. And also in the roadmap to reopening, it suggested in there in several places, it talked about a hybrid type situation for families depending on the number of cases. So, I mean, that's another place where we've gotten this information from, is directly from ADE and them talking about offering that hybrid type model, because we don't know. Like, the fact is that there's a possibility we could end in and out of school this year. We could be in school just to turn around and have to be back in distance learning. So that's why, I mean, my understanding was that that's another reason why they wanted to have that type of model in place. And it helps us to make our class sizes smaller, whereas we might not be able to do that in a 5-day lesson. Like, when we have that in your slideshow, it shows that we might not be able to make those class sizes smaller. So a hybrid model does allow us to have that smaller class size when your kids are going to school, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yes. Yes. So for their in-person time. Yes, great point about the roadmap, because the roadmap had mapped out various scenarios. And it definitely has been a struggle, I would say, for the communication between all the different entities, if that makes sense, from Department of Ed to Maricopa County Health Department to our state health department. And so we've been just trying to learn and kind of catch up and go along, trying to figure out, like, when do they communicate? Because like you referenced that they talked about in the roadmap a little bit about when you would move into whichever option. So we've definitely been trying to hone in a little bit more and put the pressure on our health departments a little bit more in those areas to help us as well. But thank you, Melissa. That's a good point.
I want to make sure that everybody knows, like, we didn't just come up with these things on our own, that something that everybody's kind of getting the same information and we're all trying to do the best that we can with it. One of the things you said is that in the Digital Learning Academy, you won't have honors. Now, is that something that could change if we have enough students that are honor students now that we're looking for it to be in an online model, or we just know we're not going to do that?
I think what the desire is, or right now, based on the Digital Learning Academy, is that they'll just be meeting the individual needs of their students and be able to push them ahead. So it won't be like a typical honors, because a lot of digital learning is self-driven and self-paced as well. So I guess we could probably look at it to see if that's a need in the future, but would like to see what our individual students are able to accomplish, and that the teachers, I know, will be able to meet their individual needs as they enter into this new structure.
That's all my questions for this section.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Elaine, what about you? Do you have any questions or comments on what we've heard so far?
Yeah, I do. Hi, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, evening. Wow. So Jody, you've touched on the word flexibility, and Megan, you did the same. And I just want to really spend a minute talking about everybody's flexibility, our flexibility, the district's flexibility, teacher flexibility, parent flexibility, and then we're all going to have to do this, because if I understand this correctly, if we have the digital online and we have the hybrid and we have the 5-day, at any moment that could change. At any moment. We right now have a mandate for online learning to start on the 3rd with in-person for the 17th, but that could easily be delayed as well. And at that point, it would really have to be considered, at this point, we need to move everybody into online, because I'm assuming that would create a large gap in student equity, correct?
Correct.
So we have kids that are online for, 8 weeks while we're waiting for everybody else to have the clear to come in, then that's something that we have to touch base at that time. So whatever we decide has got to be voted, obviously, at some point, and then it's going to have to possibly change. So having that flexibility, just want to make sure that those are options that people understand. And it's like a juggling game. If we have online and we have hybrid, then we have the greater capability to have further distancing inside the 5-day. So again, juggling. To Danielle Clymer's point, it would be great if we had enough space and enough teachers to cut everything in half, but that doesn't seem to be the case right now. As far as different campuses, would I be right to assume that if a particular option is not available at one campus and the student has the option to go to another one, that would be the same for the teachers? So if we have a hybrid model at one campus, but we have teachers that really want to do full 5-day, will they have the option to go to different campuses?
So that will be something that we'll look at with the staffing, kind of like what we do for typical staffing. I know that's all the stuff that's kind of like behind the scenes that happens in a school district on a regular basis annually, probably not to this complexity by any means, but yes. And we definitely will look at how do we protect our high risk employees and what options are for them and to be able to accommodate their needs. So that will be another piece. So there's so many layers, but yes, trying to figure out, as well as could see that we may have to ask a teacher that we may need help with, like, hey, I need your expertise and would you be willing during this time, during this year, to help us at this other campus to meet the needs of those families. So it's a little daunting when we start to think of it, but I know we'll be able to work through it as we start to really look at the numbers and figure out the alignment and those pieces.
Okay, well, it's promising knowing that 37% of our teachers have already come back by saying, hey, use me where you need me. So that is definitely promising. I know we've gotten some emails from some teachers that are concerned about the hybrid model. So if that's something that they're not familiar with, but are uncomfortable with, then they will have other options as well. To the special ed pre-K, will we be thinking about additional staffing in those rooms so that that particular group of students has more of the mandated distance learning or, 2-on-1 type of deal, so there's not so much, I don't know, exposure, I guess would be the right word to say?
We will work on that. We're constantly trying to provide enough services for the very best for our children, right, and our staff and everyone, and then all while weighing where are we taking that money from. So we're going to have to be getting really creative, and that's what's going to be important for that operational team that begins meeting next week, to really think through how to be as responsible as possible for our children's safety and our staff safety, all while weighing fiscal responsibility as well. So trust me that we're thinking about that and looking at that, especially our little children who honestly, our older kids, we can teach about the distancing. Correct. We can teach about the masks. Our little kids, we can teach too, but it's going to take a little longer. So they're going to need more support. So we're definitely prioritizing that and trying to think through how can we get them that support until they evolve into it being a little more normal for them. And then we'll all go back to normal. And then
That's good. Okay, I just have one more thing to talk about, and that would be, Jody, you and I talked about our classified staff, and just really want to make sure that people know that the interest is for everybody to keep their job. No doubt about that. And the classified staff may be asked to do something outside of their normal realm of business, and for their flexibility, and possibly be pulled into something like Megan being an extra support in one of those classes, or some, side help with other teachers. So just want to make sure that everybody knows that while we are wanting students to be back in classrooms, we want our teachers happy, we want our students happy, we want our parents happy, we want our classified staff happy, we want to be happy. Somebody's not going to be happy, right? But our main intent is to try to get as close as we can. So thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. And trying to keep as many employed as possible. for as long as we can.
Yeah.
Elaine, you brought up a good point. What we are going to learn or use in far as names, just so you know, is our Digital Learning Academy will be the Digital Learning Academy. The other two models, if we have to shut down, they will just roll into distance learning, because we want to make sure that the digital learning students will have their teacher, and that'll be their teacher for the year. And they'll just keep rolling just like normal. The other groups, like you said, might have to be flexible and fluctuate in and out of distance learning. And we will be providing additional training. And what we're working on right now and working to bring to you even on Tuesday is what some of those options are. And then we're starting to map out exactly what training needs to be, because the expectations are different this year, right? We have to provide grades, we have to take attendance. So all of those components are necessary and needed. And grading has to happen, ongoing feedback, collection of work, and all of that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure we give ample training to our teachers so they feel prepared for whichever mode and model they're in that given day or time frame. So thank you.
You know, one other thing, and I apologize for coming back in, and I heard Melissa say it, and I heard you say it, and I've heard it said before, and until I said it my way, it didn't really make much sense. We cannot offer hybrid without offering 5-day in class.
Correct.
That's the whole point of having both of these. While people are like, oh, I want the hybrid. Why can't we just have hybrid? That would be perfect. Everybody will be like that. We don't get funding if we don't have a 5-day option. So people can understand that very clearly.
Right. If you did just a hybrid, just to give you an example, you would have to find a place within that building for those children to go the other 3 days. So which then defeats the whole point of the cohort. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
You're blending them with everybody.
Everybody heard that loud and clear.
And it was a good point that you kind of,
great, but we can't do that without the money.
And a great point about the financial risk and responsibility that we have during this time. We're trying to, which is tough, is to meet all of these needs with the current staff that we have. I wish that, and we'll talk a little bit later about funding and some financial components, but yeah, I wish I had an endless budget that I could just, hire and do what I would like to do. But unfortunately, we have to do it within the means that we currently are living in this very moment. So.
Okay, Tanya, do you have any questions or comments? I know we've covered a lot so far, but I want to make sure I get to you before we move on to the next section.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Everyone's been super thorough, and pretty much all my little checklists everyone has already addressed. The only thing I just wanted, and this may come up again later in the meeting, so I'll just address it now, is the timing. The timing of trying to make these decisions, just like trying to make what the choices are to start with. It's kind of it's a double-edged sword regardless of what we do, right? We want to give parents as much time as we can to plan. At the same time, we don't want to set out a plan and then have to change it when, new information and regulations and things come down the line. So, we're trying to toe that line between having enough information to make decisions that we can stick with and giving people as much time as we can. But there's just, we're trying to find that happy medium. It's difficult. I know the timing has been a big discussion a lot of people have had with me. And, again, is it perfect? But, again, we're just trying to work with as much complete information. So when we do pull the trigger on what we're going to do, we're not going to change it 700 times. And that being said, we may have to change it, but again, just trying to make a decision and stick with it. So.
Thank you. One more thing before we move on, I think we're going to talk about some safety things that we're going to look at, some protocols, but I wanted to touch on something that, I kind of mentioned in my opening statement, which is, the questions that board members typically ask themselves about any decision we're going to make, not just this one, but, is this best for students? Is this what is best for all of our students? And is this fiscally responsible? And, sometimes those things are congruent and they make sense. And sometimes they do not. What is best for students is not fiscally responsible for us, and vice versa. So, this is one of those scenarios where I think families and staff and just our community at large really needs to understand that first and foremost, we cannot operate without funding. It's impossible. We're one of the largest employers in the West Valley. We have a responsibility to, try to keep as many people employed for as long as possible. That is my personal goal. I know that is our district's goal, that, everyone to us is essential. We want everybody here teaching our kids and helping do their part. So I think, as we talk in this meeting about being fiscally responsible and funding and all of that, I think we're talking about it more now than we ever have, at least out in the open. And the reason we're doing that is because you have to understand, in order for us to be able to do any of these scenarios, we have to ensure that we are following the guidelines and the regulations set before us in order to, to meet those, to get the funding. Secondly, I want to say, I want to be clear that we are in no way saying that the 5-day model, I know we keep saying like, we're required to do it, we have to do it, it's not our choice, it's the governor's choice. In reality, I think we all agree that a 5-day model is what is best for kids. From an educational perspective, kids being in the classroom with the teacher, right? That's our typical model. That's what we want to do. Obviously, in the situation where we're in a pandemic, those physical and mental needs, sort of differ with what we think might be the best educational model. As Elaine mentioned, we've had emails from concerned staff members and teachers about certain models that we're considering aren't what's best for students. Academically, they're not going to, potentially get what they need, or the teachers aren't going to see them as much, or, they're not going to have that engagement. And I just want to be really honest that we understand that. We absolutely understand that. That is not our choice. That's not, I don't ever want to do something that I don't think is the absolute best thing academically for our kids. On the other hand, we are in a situation where there's a lot of unknowns, and the goalposts keep moving further and further away from us. And so as we try to get, excuse me, closer and closer to what we consider our typical learning model and academic excellence that we're all used to, it's just going to look a little different. And I'm really hoping that it's temporary, right? And temporary might be 6 months, temporary might be a whole year. But I think we're going to have to do what we can do and rely on the professionalism of our teachers and our staff to reach our kids wherever they are, whether they're online or in a hybrid model or in person. And I'm confident, I'm absolutely confident we can do that. One other thing, Jody, I wanted you to touch on just really quick, because you talked about it in the timeline and we didn't really confirm this. So we know that the governor has pushed back the in-person start date for schools to August 17th. I don't know that that's the final date, right? That's going to be pushed back. I know it's an aspirational date, and we're hoping to get kids back in classrooms as soon as we can, but we need to do that safely. You suggested in the timeline that we will start that first week of August when we anticipated starting in an online or distance learning, capacity. And then when the governor does reopen our buildings, we'll transition into that in-person model. Is that still what we're considering?
That's currently what we have in place, but we're going to bring you several options on Tuesday to kind of look through to see.
Okay.
Some of those options will outline the pros and the cons of each, funding pros and cons for training, all of those pieces, so that we can look through to see. And it may come out that we end up in the exact same piece, sure. But we wanted to be able to share those with you and kind of look through each of them. And then we'll of course have a recommendation that we would like that we would recommend for the choice or selection that we feel like balances both our students and our staff, so that we know, as like you just said, I mean, our teachers and our staff as a whole, they work so hard for our children, and I have no doubt in my mind that they're going to excel in whichever mode or model that they're in. And they desire to do and to be the very best that they can. And so I'm challenged and I have to provide the maximum training so that they can meet those their expectations as well as our expectations. So.
Okay, great. So we will learn more about that next week, but tentatively, still looking at early August, but we'll discuss specifics of that next week with potentially a 17th date of in-start. Okay, or excuse me, in-school starting. Okay, so if anyone doesn't have any more feedback at this point, Jody, we'll get back to the presentation.
Okay, next slide. So now we're going to jump into some safety protocols and safety spending. We wanted to be able to share this. This was a lot of questions that I think a lot of our families had. So we're just going to briefly kind of go through each of these sections. What I do want you to know is that we have various committees working on these and creating some pretty extensive documents as well as training that will occur for both students and staff in their various areas. So these are a work in progress, but because they are so comprehensive and because a lot of them are working hand in hand with not only CDC, Maricopa County Health Department, our state health department, in regards to transportation, coordinating with ADOT and all of the transportation side of the world, and also in lining with our trust. So it's pretty extensive and pretty comprehensive, but we are working on it. So we wanted to kind of share some of the insight that we have already that we could share out with our community. Megan, would you like to start with transportation and bus safety?
Yes. So the transportation operational team, Director Sims put together a group of community members, student transporters, teachers, principals, and really worked through all of the guidelines for CDC. And they came up with a really comprehensive plan that you all were provided. But basically the gist of it is that every route has 3 runs. And after each run, they will disinfect high touch areas with alcohol wipes. After each route, they will clean and disinfect with our Waxy 700 product that we're using to sanitize. And then for ventilation, I know it's hard because we want to encourage ventilation, but then it's extremely hot outside, and especially on the buses. So we're looking at having the roof hatches open and the rear windows open 3 inches. And the team and all of Tommy's studying and working on and talking to people that should not compromise the air condition and the coolness on the bus for our children. They also are requiring masks of the student transporters and student monitors and the children. They will have disposable ones on the bus for if a child needs one. There will be 2 students per seat. They will encourage family members or require family members to sit together. And the first row behind the driver will be empty so that if a child gets on and the student transporter does a wellness check and there's any symptoms and the parent is not there, they are encouraging the parents to wait with them at the bus stop so that they can do a wellness check, a visual wellness check. And then if the child has symptoms, be sent home with the parents. But if the parent is not there, they obviously will take the child, put them in that first seat and ensure they have a mask on and transport them to school and to the nurse for the nurse's support to go through her protocol then. So those are what the committee has put together in their comprehensive plan. There's a lot more to it, but that's the gist of what transportation has decided will be the best for our children.
Okay. And next, cohorts and containment. We kind of spoke a little bit to that about cohorting our students and having them together throughout the day, and that we won't be mixing children throughout the day. The other piece with the cohorting that I feel kind of ties right to that is the playground equipment and going out to the playgrounds. So they'll go out as a cohort to the playground. Each campus is working on, so we have an overall arching committee kind of putting together all the pieces, but every campus is a little different. So what that would look like out on the playgrounds would probably depend on the size of their field, but they will be working on schedules so that they can make sure that they're evenly spaced out. We also are purchasing and have sprayers for disinfectant to spray down the play structures for children if they're have played on them. So after every group, every cohort, before the next cohort could come out to that play structure, the structure will be disinfected. The other component with those cohorts is that students will report directly to class in the morning. So the overarching committee is kind of putting together some of those types. Then every individual campus will kind of work through the details, because we have entry points at every campus that are a little bit different. And so they'll work through those details to determine what's the safest place and how will they safely get our children into campus and at their classroom. Face coverings will be expected, for either a mask or a shield. Of course, any student who has difficulty breathing or who is incapable of physically removing that face covering on their own will find an alternate method, which the face shields seem to be a pretty nice method for them. In relation to events or field trips, just to kind of let you know, in that those will be postponed until further notice, but we will encourage, and of course teachers will do virtual field trips, of course, and have things that they can show and expose their children to in class at that time. Preventative behaviors, our health committee, which is charged with our with various stakeholders, including one of our lead nurses is leading that committee. So they're looking at all of the different preventative behaviors and then what training will be provided to, and having it all together, resources directly for the teachers. So they have that and they can just jump right in and look at lessons. There's videos already included to help kids and all different ages, so that they know which age group the videos and the training is for. Physical distancing, of course, just kind of making sure that we're keeping that physical distancing and ensuring that throughout the campus at all times. So it will be a lot of training, a lot of procedural training with our students as they learn how to walk, to ensure there's distancing between them in lines, as well as distancing within their classroom. And then we're coming up, Dan's been doing an amazing job of working with that committee to come up with some little cheater things like Velcro on carpet, so that they can keep their desk aligned and in the right spot. Megan, would you like to give an update on food services?
Sure. So food services is working. Chef Ron and Gina are working with that CDC committee, and some of the procedures they're working out right now is that children who eat breakfast in the cafeteria will go directly into the cafeteria. Because it's a lower number of children that eat breakfast than lunch, the cashier will be able to punch in the child's number for them to avoid that touch. And they will be provided some choices, but they will not be reaching in the salad bar or the fruit bar. They'll be provided some prepackaged choices, and they're working through those right now for children to get and then go to their space. We'll have staff in the cafeteria ready to help them and encourage them and show them where to sit. We'll be distancing in the table, have specified spots at every table where children can sit. And then there will, when they leave, we'll have group assistants in there to sanitize and clean up and be ready for the lunch. Lunch, when they come in, basically schools will be working on a few classes at a time, being able to eat in the cafeteria and utilizing other rooms to spread out, to allow kids the time to get out of their classroom, stay with their cohorts, but provide that movement and different setting for the day. We are encouraging the use of only hard surfaced rooms, because as we talked about, the peaches could get our carpet very dirty, and different things that our children obviously are eating might mess up our beautiful carpets, and we want to make sure that we are cognizant of that. But so we're encouraging the cafeteria and the gym, or thinking through any other areas that will provide them a space that they can be with their cohort, sit and enjoy themselves at lunch, get out of their classroom, because we're unable to utilize our outside eating areas as at the start of the school. But once the temperature drops, we will be utilizing those outside eating areas. So that is food services. And I know that Gina and Chef Ron are going to a meeting on Monday from ADE to get additional guidance as to when grab and go lunches will stop, and when and how that works, and everything we're able to do as we transition back into our in-school setting.
Okay, and then jumping into cleaning and disinfecting, as a part of our cleaning regimen, we will make sure that we're using all EPA approved disinfectant cleaners. Classroom touch points will be the definite area of focus throughout the day, as well as bathroom touch points, and that area, every classroom will be provided with the approved disinfectant cleaning solution so that they can do that throughout the day as they feel comfortable as well. We also purchased soap for every classroom with a sink, and we will have hand sanitizer for any classroom that did not have a sink within it. So they'll have ample resources there, as well as we are creating a COVID warehouse where we will house face shields for the youngers and also extra masks. And those masks will also, like every school will start with a starter kit. So they have them there, and then they'll just replenish as they need, as well as gloves in that area as well. Shared belongings. I mean, this sounds so sad. We'll be encouraging children not to share. They will not be sharing their belongings. So they will need their own crayons, their own scissors, those kind of things. So children will have their own belongings that they will use and unfortunately won't be able to share with their friends. When we look at ventilation, that was something that was also really important, and Dan has done such a great job. He has a regular schedule to change all air filters and looking at the filtration system and kind of keeping that on track, and so that it's done in a timely fashion. Also adjusting our HVAC systems so that we can always continue to ensure, and he monitors the outdoor airflow that's coming into the buildings, and that can all be monitored centrally for him. Unfortunately, volunteers and visitors will not be allowed at this time, and once we get to a safer point, then we'll be ecstatic and happy to invite them back into our schools. Employee training definitely will be happening, and we're mapping that out for both our leaders and then what will transpire and happen within their campuses, as well as all staff. And we've added it to several of our safe schools, which is a required online training that our staff does every year. Some other questions I know that have come about is what happens if a child is sick in a classroom, and what are those steps? So our nurses will be working on that training, and everyone, and they'll work hand in hand with the Maricopa County Department of Public Health. It is really very similar and similar practice as we would with any outbreak. So even if it would have been the measles, the mumps, chickenpox, all of those types of things. So they work hand in hand. There would be a standard notification that would go out to families. Of course, due to HIPAA, we would never release a name, but there'd be standard protocol. Within that, and working with the county health department, there is very structured and guidelines on what does the cleaning protocol look like, as well as they would instruct us of whether we would shut down a classroom, a grade level, or school based on the contamination within that setting. In addition, we also have on the employee side, the nurse, as well as supervisors in any arena and principals work hand in hand with the HR department. HR has protocol specifically outlined and trigger points of how do they gather information if they are notified that an employee may have symptoms or appears to be sick, or they're self-reporting. So they have exactly outlined for every employee of exactly what to do, and they walk them through hand in hand so that way the employee knows exactly which leave they qualify for and what steps to take during that time, of whether they are just feeling ill or if they actually have symptoms, and what steps they need to take to move forward so that we can ensure the campus and or the building or department remains safe. That's all we have for protocol at this time. We also, just as a random piece too, every campus and every building also has touchless thermometers so that they can utilize those as needed. And just so that you know too, something that just popped in my head, for a school campus, as well as a building too, but for specifically a school, if a child is ill, as well as if an adult is ill on that campus, they will have an isolation space that's designated just for that. So the typical boo-boos or owies and that kind of stuff, they'll have that space. And then the ones that are possibly having those symptoms, they will have a different space so that we're not cross-contaminating. But I'm open to any questions. I know this is kind of a big area. And again, we're working on outlining a very detailed protocol so that we can get those out to our families, but they're just finalizing all of the different pieces with the health department and ensuring that we have everything accurate.
And like Jody said at the beginning, on Tuesday at our board meeting, we will have some of these operational teams report out to you their work. So you'll hear more specifics and more details straight from them on Tuesday as well.
Thank you guys very much. I know this is, I would say this is the toughest part, but that's not even true. All of this is tough and hard. There's not a toughest part, but I know the safety protocols are, very important to us as we're protecting children and staff and, anyone who may be on campus, but also for the families and staff that are listening. I want them to understand too that, there's a lot of moving pieces to this, and we're trying to work through every single one of these items here, plus the million more that were not listed of protocols that have to be created. So going back to my earlier comments, I think, my job here as a board member is to make sure that the district understands, sort of my perspective and our perspective as a board of what we expect across the board. Obviously, safety for our students and our staff, and how each one of these are done. I am, extremely confident that we are going to make the best decisions we can with the resources that we have available. So I don't know that, for me personally, I don't need to go through each one of these things. There's a few though that I want to highlight just because I think they're probably on the top of mind for a lot of folks and families especially that are watching. I've had a lot of questions and feedback, both from students, families, and staff about face coverings and whether they're going to be required or mandated, or, what's the wording and what's the verbiage, whether they are required by our local city or state or whatever ordinances right now. We will absolutely follow that. I think that's important, and I think it's important that we have this in place no matter what. So even if those do expire or things change, I absolutely think the board will be having that conversation to update any district policies we need to have to make sure that we ensure that we are as safe as possible. So while we say right now we're face covering, we're following the orders, the local orders, if for some reason that changes, I hope we will have that conversation here that says, while those things changed, maybe our district policy should change to cover new situations as they arise, as those ordinances expire. The second thing, I just want to say thank you for the playground equipment and trying to figure out how in the world you're going to allow kids to be kids and to play and to socialize and to have fresh air. I think that's imperative. Number one, just for their mental sanity of, being outside and experiencing, learning through play. But also for our teachers and other staff to, sort of be able to have some of that time while the kids are outside to replenish themselves, and whether it's clean or go to the bathroom or do whatever they need to do, having those breaks, I think is really important for the staff to be able to do that. So thank you for working on that and trying to figure it out. I know a lot of families are worried about their kids sort of getting their wiggles out, if you would, use that terminology during the day. The third piece I want to touch on, this is the last one, is cleaning and disinfecting. And I know these protocols are so deep and vast and all of that kind of stuff. Jody, talk to me about, we have an awesome custodial crew that comes in every single night. They've been there over summer. They've been doing a lot of these things already. They've been practicing, trying to figure out what's going to work best. Can you just at a high level explain what is going to be the responsibility of a classroom teacher, or maybe a staff member at the school, versus a member of our custodial team, which we'd be doing deeper cleaning, overnight cleaning, maybe for the hybrid model during certain days they'd be cleaning, that kind of thing. Can you just identify sort of how we're looking at those responsibility and who's going to sort of be responsible for what?
So we're looking through those kind of more in detail now, and then we're also looking at going kind of back to Elaine's point before of being creative with our staff that we currently have, right? And then what we're doing is analyzing what extra supports do we need during the day. We know if we give the cleaning solutions to our staff, they'll use it. And so they feel empowered. And we've been doing that all summer long in all of our like district office and all of the different offices, support services and all of those locations. We want to make sure that a teacher feels comfortable and confident that if she needs or feels like she needs to sanitize something or disinfect something, she's got the solution there to do that. We also can see that we'll probably utilize extra assistance from our classified staff in helping with all of those different pieces as we work through the details. And then of course the day custodial staff will be working tirelessly, of course, throughout the day to do this as well. So I see it as a team effort, and we haven't necessarily broken it down exactly specifically, but we definitely are looking at additional people to kind of help, like with bathroom monitoring and that kind of thing, of what different roles and what different people do we currently have on staff that can help support and assist, can help and support and assist during lunchtime, help and support and assist during, the front office, because if, we still will have parents come in and outside people come in to either pick up a child or to drop off something. So we want to make sure that we are disinfecting our areas and keeping everyone safe, but empowering them to do so too. I don't know if that specifically answered.
And Madam President, Dan Ensign has really thought through a lot of this, and he's working with the CDC physical distancing team and thinking through. And what he shared with us was that there's going to be stations at each school with all the supplies that any staff member needs to do this. And he will be training them all on how to utilize them in the most effective way possible. And then we won't be leaving it to luck when people have time, that our additional staff that maybe need a different responsibility in order to keep them on staff will be assigned certain areas to do extra cleaning in addition to what the custodian usually does. So we're going to be very intentional about training and assigning those people to areas to ensure that happens.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll just go through the board members again, like we did before, and let everyone kind of have their chance to discuss or provide comments. Melissa, we'll start with you again. Any questions, comments on this section?
Well, my big question was the cleaning, but you got that. But my other question is when there is a case, because we know that there's going to be at some point, and we have it in a classroom, whether it be the teacher or the student, we have to move those kids out of that classroom. So where are they going to go? Specifically, like if there's a campus that's very full and they have a lot of kids that want to be on campus and we don't have a lot of kids there that decided to do the hybrid model or that didn't want to do the online model, where are we going to put those students? Because we have some schools where there's no extra classrooms right now.
So I think a lot of that could be twofold, Melissa. I think part of it would be whether we have to shut down the classroom and those students become distant learners because they may have to quarantine, or if we do have the flexibility that the health department states that they could be on campus. We won't know, and they will guide us in that instruction. If by chance it was that they said you may return to campus, we know that we will have some space available because we won't be utilizing our special areas in the same exact way, those rooms, right? Because the teachers will be traveling. The second thing that we know is that we have some classrooms that will be the actual digital learning, like that would have been a typical teacher, but now that teacher's in digital learning, right? So it could be an extra classroom, as well as, thinking creatively, our interventions will look a little different. So those intervention rooms might end up becoming a classroom that a cohort of students might have to go in there for a period of time. So I think with the different structures that we have, I think we still will, even though those campuses are typically full, with having now the online digital learning academy and with having our teachers travel, I think that will allow us a little bit more flexibility with space.
Okay, so say this happens in a middle school setting and we have 4 classes or 5 classes of kids that have now potentially need to move. If a teacher gets it and it's one of the teachers that rotates through multiple classes, you still think we'll be able to figure out where to put all those kids if we have to move them, not to distance learning, but just into another classroom? We don't think that will be a concern?
I think we could probably figure it out. The great thing about the health department is they have very structured guidelines for exposure. And with us, the main point, and this kind of goes back to a little bit about what Danielle said, is the importance of face coverings. That is so important, especially when somebody becomes exposed, because that limits the exposure, right? And they narrow it down to, you know, how long were you exposed to the person who was infected without any protective, like PPE, face coverings. And that's where it kind of narrows it down. So it's, you know, were you and I standing close together with no face masks, then my chances of getting it is a little bit higher. But if everybody was wearing the face coverings like we're requiring and asking, and that will limit that exposure. So we'll have to kind of take their guidance. But yeah, those are kind of things that we're going to have to try to figure out probably in the moment that they happen. And that was where that, I believe it was scenario 4, correct me if I'm wrong, Megan probably remembers, but our county health department stated very clearly that you have to be prepared to go into scenario 4 at any given moment. That could be a Friday afternoon where we have to notify families that unfortunately that classroom, that grade level, or that campus might be closed for a period of time due to a case being notified. So, but that guidance would come from there. If it wasn't that we had to shut down and we had to be creative with spacing, we would definitely figure out a place, not to where they would all be lumped together, but utilize the facilities the best way possible. Where that could be where we're utilizing gyms maybe in a different fashion and spreading them out. Our music rooms, thinking of, you know, our middle schools because they're larger, and media centers. So I think there's a lot of little nooks and crannies that won't be used in their typical fashion that we could set up as classrooms if needed.
Okay, and then next you said that we would have a letter typical to like what we did if there's a strep or something going around. Is it possible that we are going to be doing more than that, like doing actual phone calls to families? Because I feel like a letter can get lost. Sometimes when you send something home, kids don't always bring that home or whatever. So is that possible that we're going to look at calling people, especially if we're going to have to shut down a classroom?
That's a great question. And let me pose that back to the committee that's designing all of these protocols, which is with our school nurses. So I can definitely get that back to them as feedback.
That was my only questions for this section.
Thanks, Melissa. Elaine, you're next. Do you have any comments or feedback for this section?
You know, my only comment was going to be exactly what Melissa just said and what Jody also mentioned. If and when there is an outbreak, just that people know that choosing one of these options, our job is to be as safe as possible and to keep your kids as safe as possible and to keep our staff as safe as possible. But at any given time, this could happen. And just to make sure that people know that while we try our best, knowing what to do after that when those mandates come down will definitely be the action that we take.
That's a great point. Tanya, what about you?
Oops, sorry, I muted him, unmuted. Just thank you for the detail that you guys have all gone into with all these different steps, you know, thinking about how, you know, trying to figure out how are the kids going to get to their classrooms in the morning. You know, it's not just during the day, it's all those little pieces in between. My only real question was, and I think that you kind of addressed this, but Jody, I'm assuming these protocols are going to be same for all the schools, correct? As far as, you know, and to be fair, if and when most likely something does happen, we have something that is sort of standard, so that, you know, whether you're at a middle school or an elementary or whichever one you're at, everyone is seeing the same things, you know, when things happen.
Absolutely. So, and I thank you all for thinking, I mean, this is not me. This is the work of those committees, and they have done just an amazing job. I mean, really analyzing the flow of traffic and looking at so that a specific principal could determine the level of risk on each area, playground, arrival, dismissal, traveling to the cafeteria, traveling outside, all of those pieces, and they've done a really, really good job. And then our health protocol subcommittee, our health committee, I mean, they are going through every single detail, and they will have links attached to it so that a principal will know and a nurse will know, and the nurses will all be trained, because your two main points of contact in regards to this is your school nurse and human resources. So that way they're getting the same information, same protocol, same steps, and it's very, very consistent. So.
And Tanya, just to follow up with that, the CDC physical distancing team has created an incredible document for all of our leaders that says basically district non-negotiables and then site decisions that can be made based on certain things. So we're very clear as to what we're expecting in all of our schools to provide that consistency and that level of safety across the board. And then there's going to be, certain things, obviously, that the principal then says, based on my site, I can decide how many people can be on the playground because my playground looks a little different than the other ones. So we've been very clear at laying that out, and our CDC physical distancing team has done an incredible job to constantly run it past our superintendent cabinet to say, okay, which one is this, a district decision, or are we going to leave it up to a site? So we've walked with them through that to make sure, because I heard from the board, and it was our feeling as well, that we cannot leave it up to the schools to put that on the weight on their backs, or if a parent has an elementary student and a middle school student and things are different and they're questioned on that, or we have to make sure that they're empowered with all that district-wide.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Okay, so one other thing, just to piggyback off what Megan just said. So, obviously there's going to be site-based decisions. There's going to have to be. We have schools that have 500 kids. We have schools that have 1,000 children. So, student capacity and different learning models and whatever comes from that, obviously there's going to be site-based decisions. But yes, I think, in conversations we've had in the past and moving forward, I think you're absolutely right. The board certainly feels it's crucial to have these district-wide protocols so that no matter where you go or what site you teach at or your kids attend, they know that all of those protocols are being followed, by all of the staff and everyone there. One thing before we close this out, and Jody, I'll transfer it back over to you, is, I want to make it really clear, because if it wasn't already, outside of, Dr. Fitzer, none of us have a medical background. We are following, and please know that we have relied on that medical background, right, Tanya? What are we doing? How does this work? What does this mean? Her role on this board is not our, safety guideline person, but, I think it's important to know that we are listening and we are absorbing and we are researching and we are asking questions of our Department of Education and our governor's office and Maricopa County Health and our state health officials to say what is safe and what isn't. I think we've all seen in the media the CDC guidelines and some other levels of things that in a best case scenario, that's what you should be doing. And I'm sure there are probably many parents and staff members that are looking at this presentation right now saying, but you're not following every single one of those guidelines. And that is true, we're not. We are going to follow every single guideline that we absolutely can, and our local, health, public health officials are walking us through what that looks like on our sites and our campus. While you might look at some national standards that would be good for everybody, as we kind of narrow that down and look in our community and our campuses what that looks like. And a lot of that just is based on the practicality of educating 12,000 students every day. We are required to give people an excellent public education, and that's what we're trying to do. And we're going to do it in the safest way we can. So I know there are still going to be questions about kids aren't 6 feet apart, and there's more than one person on a bus, in a bus seat, and there's all of these things. And I will say that as we get into this, I completely expect that these protocols will only get better as we see the number of kids that are taking certain models or opt to do transportation or opt to do transportation, that might mean that we're able to create even more social distancing, or we're able to, create additional protocols that might put, a layer between certain cohorts. So I think I just want people to understand that we are working towards doing this and meeting every guideline that we possibly can, because we know that physical safety right now is paramount for everybody. That has to be on our campus and in a bus and all of that kind of stuff. So anyway, with that, Jody, I'll turn it back over to you. And again, a big thank you for kind of walking us through all of this, knowing that there's going to be many more details to come, but thank you for giving us this update.
You're welcome. Okay, next slide. So one of the things, we did have some questions, and this kind of, I hope, gives you a little bit of insight. So when folks asked, like, why wouldn't you just do one student per seat on a bus? So when we looked at that and we're kind of looking at what that cost would be, we would need 34 additional buses to transport our current student numbers. That would be 5.3 million, and we would need 34 additional drivers, which would be a little over 900,000. So we would have to come up with 6.2 million in funding, and which we just don't have. So that's where kind of, Danielle, like what you were saying, is that there are definitely things we would love to do, but financially, we just don't have the means to do it. Same thing as I had a lot of parents and staff even at times ask, like, why couldn't you just cut class sizes? Why can't we make class sizes smaller? So if I cut your class size in half, or, from a family perspective looking in, like just, cut it down, we would actually need 400 additional teachers, and like Melissa brought up, there's just limited space. We wouldn't be able to even house all those teachers, and that would be about $28 million. So just kind of thinking and kind of, it's really hard, I know, to understand at times that we have a very limited budget and we have to live within the means of that budget. And that's why we're trying to meet all of the different options with the current staff that we have. Our greatest areas of impact during this time that we will continue to monitor is food services and community education. And within community ed, that's preschool and extended day. And we'll have to continue to monitor and give you feedback and insight as we learn more and as we learn about what options we have that will be important to, that we'll be looking at in the future. As we come to a close, I did already kind of touch on the executive order, but the executive order, both of them from the governor, is kind of what has driven us during this time. We are, again, waiting for additional guidance from the Arizona Department of Ed to help us through that, to hopefully help us with some of any funding shortages that we may have. We did receive CARES money, and we're utilizing that for all of our PPE and also some of the training and prep work for reopening our campuses. And as many people know, I'm not necessarily as comfortable being like in a video or, I don't know, in a large meeting or whatever. I am challenging myself to do a parent forum. So we're working on that. So parent forum will be coming soon, and we will let our parents and families know in the near future about when that will be. And hopefully I will have even more information and more insight, but we'll definitely answer the questions with the information that we have at the time that we have it to help families feel safe and secure and maybe more confident in what the 2020-2021 school year will look like. And with that, we'll go into our final slide, where we just want to thank everybody and all of our families, all of our students, all of our staff and community. And I'm so grateful and so gracious. I overwhelmingly feel very supported by all of those groups, as well as you, as we go through a very, very tough and difficult time. And it is definitely been a bucket filler, a heart warmer, to have the positive emails and the supports and coming in from all random people, and even the staff as well as families who express their concerns. They've just done it in such a polite, caring, thoughtful way, as they know that these decisions that we are facing are definitely tough. To kind of let you know from a district perspective where we're sitting at right now, we are continuing on with a further deeper analysis of all of the staff survey data, all of our parent survey data, so that we can have even a more concrete feel on these additional options, as well as we have submitted these options to our legal counsel to review the fiscal risk and liability, and if there is any in those areas. And I know that you all have the opportunity to make a decision and vote on these tonight. I have to tell you, I'm still, my stomach's just a little wary because I feel like we still need to do a little bit more research. And maybe Tuesday night would be a more confident night for me, since I haven't had a chance to discuss all of those components with our legal counsel. But I will turn it over to you, Madam President, for any final questions and next steps.
Thank you, Jody. First, I want to say, before we kind of go into our next section of the agenda, which would be a possible vote, is the purpose of this meeting and the purpose of really everything that we do here, even though it doesn't feel like we're in the public because we can't all be together right now, is we really do want to be transparent. I know it's been hard for families because it feels like there's so much information and yet there's no information, right? There's no, real decisions being made. And I think the hesitancy on our part is, as you mentioned before, things are changing, on a weekly basis. So I think it's important for us as board members, and also the community watching, that, we may decide tonight or next Tuesday or whenever is subject to change. There are laws and regulations that are coming down on a consistent basis, and we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that we are compliant and we are, following all of those protocols, whether they be for proper funding or for safety or for, whatever that might be for students. So anyway, we are trying to make our thought process and decision-making resources available to you so that you see, what we know, but things are ever changing. So please just understand, as we continue to meet throughout this next month, which we'll have a couple of different meetings, things are subject to change. So what we say with accuracy and confidence today may be less accurate, or we may have less confidence 2 weeks from now, once we've heard, from other resources around us. So anyway, knowing that, we'll move on. I'd like to have an open conversation with the board right now in terms of, moving forward with this vote, talking about all three scenarios in total, what questions we still have, what effects this will have. Obviously, as Jody's still working through, details and what we're going to do, and the information we still feel like we might need. So any comments or feedback in terms of that as we move forward in that discussion?
My question is, do you think that the information you get from the lawyer on Monday is going to change your recommendation to us for options to be offered?
I don't know. That's where it's really hard. I would have never guessed if you would have asked me even a week ago in the earlier part of the week if we were going to have to delay the opening of school. I kind of thought it might be coming, but I wasn't expecting it to come at the time that it came. So it's really hard. I think what's hard too is right now we just don't know, we're reading these executive orders, we're reading all of the information, and our legal counsel is working just as fast as we are to just try to understand it and understand it in the detail to ensure that we're not putting the district in any kind of fiscal risk or liability. So that I don't know, Melissa, but there could be something that comes back and financially, maybe we can't meet the needs of all of it. I don't know. So for example, what if it did come back that we have to have a 5-day option for all 3 models, that there has to be a safe place on a campus for a child to go regardless of the model? That could change what options we offer and what we do. Because how operationally we might have to stop, rethink, look at operationally, how would that look and what would we do? So it's just hard right now because there are some unknowns, and I just took pause when she said that, and wanted me to send them to her, and I did. And we have a conference call on Monday. And so I don't know for certain though. I mean, she didn't give me a hint.
Jody, do you think it's fair to say that based on the information that we know to date in terms of funding and following, you know, the state guidelines as we know them today, that the 5-day, InPerson model will be on the table and will most likely continue to be required in some format? And whether it's under this model in terms of 3 scenarios or under our AOI certificate for online instruction, that the online model will be viable in terms of numbers of students, and that they will, be counted in the same way, in terms of other students. So really what we're talking about is that middle choice, that hybrid model of viability and legality and where we sit. So just so that the board really understands, those 2 models are more are less questionable, as it were. It's the hybrid model of what we may have to offer, what we may be able to do with students, that's still questionable. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment. And even looking at, to add even more complexity to it, is what does that look like in a middle school setting when you have to have highly qualified teachers to teach the contents? It is really complex. So having a little bit more time to kind of dig into it a little bit deeper. We do have a middle school team kind of looking at what options we could do for a hybrid. Yeah, and then I think looking at that whole risk and components that I don't know what our legal counsel will come back with, but looking at that piece and that component as well.
Okay, Elaine, Tanya, do you have any other comments or feedback in terms of these 3 scenarios and, making decisions based on the information we know versus waiting?
Yeah, I'm a little leery of making promises we can't keep. Now, granted, that may happen regardless with, everything changing, right? I mean, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but, this meeting originally was scheduled so we could make a vote and try and get things moving. It was very intentional to try and, be as quick as we responsibly could be. I feel like offering options without legal counsel reviewing them isn't a responsible way to make promises. Again, we may have to change them regardless. Who knows? That's part of this whole unknown situation, but that does make me uncomfortable. Again, the point was to try and do this. That was our original plan, but of course that was before the start date changed with the governor, and then, that changes a lot of factors. So, and then new requirements that came with that. So that's my 2 cents. I mean, I don't want to delay, but at the same time, if I feel that there's a chance that I already don't have all the information that I can have, which is, I think, where we are at the moment with the legal portion of it, it makes me nervous to say, oh, these are what we're going to offer, and 3 days later say, no, just kidding.
Mm-hmm. Elaine?
Yeah, I'm along the same lines as Tanya. In our normal voting business, we have the information at the board meeting, we vote on the information. This is probably one of the biggest, decisions that we're going to make as a board, or certainly one that deserves information. And I think that when we asked to have this meeting, that was what was lacking, at least for me, was information. We knew that these were the 3 possibilities, but to this presentation, you have answered a lot of questions that I think a lot of people had. I know that I had. And so I feel that with the information that is here, I've gotten what I needed. I can now think about this. I can digest this. I am definitely with Jody in if we need a legal counsel on this, we have to wait for that. To Tanya's point, making promises that we can't keep. Again, flexibility, things can change anyway. But you also mentioned that you're going to be bringing us some more information on Tuesday. You said that some of the committees are going to be coming and talking maybe more in depth on these issues. And then is it possible, Jody, in such a short amount of time, I don't know, and if it's not, it's okay, to have an idea of what staffing is going to look like, right? I mean, is someone by Tuesday, I know that only gives you Friday and Monday to even put a sliver of possibility together, but that would be something that more information could help sway us either way. And to Danielle's point, absolutely. I feel 100% we are definitely going to have the 5-day option and the distant learning academy. It's the hybrid that's in the middle that we're waiting on.
And Elaine, we're going to work all day on Monday. Tomorrow's a holiday, just so everybody knows. So we are not working tomorrow.
Jody, you take holidays?
I cannot tell you how excited I am right now about the holiday. But we booked all day Monday just for that purpose, to really look at all of the staffing component and really dig into in detail all of that data, because we have a lot of data right now.
Sure. And just so the community knows, we wanted to get the information to you as soon as possible. If you look at the difference between this date and then the 12th, we're looking at a 5-day difference, but we felt it was just as important for you to have that information, even if it's only 5 days before, even if it's 1 day before. Transparency is something that this board has from the get-go really focused on. And I think that gives us exactly what we're hoping to be as a board.
And it may very well that we come back on Tuesday with these exact 3 options with no hiccups at all.
True. And we could have a different mandate by that point. So, but to Tanya's point, yeah, I think it's safer to wait for legal. But I'm just really glad that we have the information and that we've had this meeting so parents can get this and digest it as well, because they may very well come back and make changes to what their original decision was, as you had said. Okay, thank you.
Jody, would it be beneficial or helpful in any way for us to go ahead and propose a vote on the online academy and the 5-day in-person model, knowing that we're, those don't have any as many challenges necessarily, and those are, one of those is sort of a mandated option, and the other one is something that we've been planning for a while, and then sort of table the hybrid option until Tuesday, and then determine whether that might be a feasible option after you've had time to, get some more information together and make further presentations. Do you think that would be beneficial?
I think I honestly would probably prefer to speak to legal first, just to look at it all prior to jumping on any of them, if that makes sense. Because what if she did come up with something different, and I had to come up with some different form or different, maybe it is just hybrid and digital learning, but I have to figure out a hybrid for 5 days. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that she would, but I think I would just feel comfortable just talking to her. So I felt really solid and confident coming in the next, at that Tuesday meeting of, here we go, and here's the information. And then that you would feel confident to know exactly which 2 models work best for the district as a whole, and for the staff and the community.
Okay, then I think this is what, well, let me say, are there any other comments, suggestion, feedback? Melissa, did you have anything else further? I know you went first, so do you have any comments now that you've heard everyone else's?
So I was really, really wanting us to vote tonight. I was a big push for this because I wanted to make sure that we got this information out and we decided, so it wasn't a headache for anybody anymore, for our families and for our staff. And I totally agree that we have to responsibly wait to hear back from legal, because I think people should know that the decisions we're making, some of the stuff is not is out of our hands. We have to make sure that we are complying with the executive orders from the governor, that we are complying with, all the rules that we have to follow, and that not all of it is, is this what we want, but is this something we are able to do? Even if it is something that we think that this is what we'd like to do, it might not be a feasible thing for us to do. it might not be something we can financially do. I really appreciate all the financial stuff you put in there to explain to parents why we're not just, going to add 400 teachers, because we have a finite amount of money we're working with, and we have to be responsible with that money. It's something we've been really good at doing all these years now, and it makes us in a better position maybe than some districts with what we're dealing with right now, but we want to make sure that we continue to be able to do that going forward. So even though I really wanted us to vote tonight, I completely understand why we probably need to wait until Tuesday.
Okay. Understood. Then what I would suggest, I will say, Jody, that, from the information that you've provided this evening, I think it is important to have the conversation, internally with your, executive team as well as the legal team to say, it's clear from the parent surveys and the feedback that they want choices. It was 25%, 35%, 45%, whatever those numbers came down, people want options. So while I know that I think we're all in agreement that if we could have a typical school day with our regular teachers and our regular classrooms and everything be in the 5-day model, that would be our choice. I think right now there is too much uncertainty, and there's too much, really just chaos out there in terms of information and whatnot. So I want to be responsible and wait, but I also want to really encourage you to do what you can to preserve those 3 models if possible. I know feasibility is important, but it's clear that our community wants sort of that, both of the options sort of on the outside and then that bridge in the middle. They just, we're really unsure about what's going to happen. And I know that middle model is going to be extremely difficult. I know it's going to be hard for staff. I know it's going to be hard for families to make it work and to get all of the same amazing programs and curriculum and all of that we would do in a normal day, do that in this hybrid model. But I do really think that if that many families are feeling like that is the best choice, it's responsible of us to try and make that work, or at least, look at every avenue that we can to make it feasible before we, kind of break them down individually. So anyway, that's what I would encourage you to do between now and Tuesday, as you're gathering that data and research is, just really keep open as many viable options as we possibly can before we, come to a vote.
Absolutely. And I think it is important. I think it's important for all. So that's why we always, we kind of jumped out of the gate with 3 different options, because we felt based on feedback at the time, that's what we were, seeing was desired. So absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Well, then I will make a motion to table the vote currently on the agenda for the 3 scenarios until Tuesday, July 7th. And I just need a second.
I second. Elaine Weathersby.
Any comments, feedback, discussion before we move to vote? No. Okay. I'd like to do this individually just because we're in the Zoom format, so I'll call on you to vote. Okay. So Elaine, what is your vote?
Yay.
Melissa?
Yay.
Tanya?
Yay.
I'm Danielle Clymer. I am also yay. So that is 4 votes in the affirmative. Motion carries. This vote will be tabled until Tuesday, July 7th, where we can get more information from our legal counsel, as well as some other additional research that our committees and work groups are doing now. So thank you, everyone. I know we're now at the 2-hour mark, so we have gone over a little bit what I expected in our time, but I think all of this information is extremely important. And I just encourage you to be supportive and of your neighbors and your peers and your everyone that's around you, because everyone's in a different place right now. And I think that's one thing that we can all do, is just support each other in our decisions of whatever we need to do for our families and for our students specifically. So thank you, Jody and Megan, for all of the information. I know that you guys are literally running minute to minute and new information is surfacing all the time. So we really appreciate it. I'm sorry that we didn't get to vote tonight and make things more definite, but I hope that you heard the conversation and know, where we're going and where we're hoping to head, and the optimism that we have in terms of offering choices and continuing to drill down in all of the details and the protocols and everything that's going to happen between now and the 1st of August. So with that, I will accept any motions to adjourn if there's no other comments.
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you, Tanya. I think we can do this as an all in favor. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
you. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thanks. Happy 4th of July for sure.
Yes.